What's up, everybody? CHM Carnivores here. I hope that you're having a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Now, it's getting harder and harder to move in the grow tent as the plants are growing. That is a good problem to have. Today in this video, I want to talk about the different types of carnivorous plants and what plants best suit you based on your growing experience and based on your growing conditions. We're going to discuss Nepenthes, Drosera, and several more types of carnivorous plants. Do they require the same care? What kind of care do they require? And all the little nuances of growing each. I will explain what you'll possibly need in order to grow each of these plants, and then we will discuss whether or not that is a feasible option for you. Now, this is by no means an all-encompassing video that would take hours and hours and hours given all the carnivorous plants. This is meant as a beginner's guide to help set you up for success no matter what carnivorous plant you choose. I hope to see you soon. Enjoy the video. Stick around. What's up, everybody? Now, as you all know, if you watch the videos, that my biggest love of carnivorous plants and plants in general are Nepenthes. They are my favorite. But I also happen to have several other carnivorous plants, and I not equally, but I love them a lot as well. Nothing, in my opinion, will top the Nepenthes. However, when you first start getting into carnivorous plants, I actually belong to several different beginner carnivorous plants forums where I try to educate and help people through the sort of quagmire that is the carnivorous plant options that they have and help them decide. I also try to help dispel a lot of the gatekeepers out there that's in, for whatever reason, whether it's purposeful or not, try to dissuade people from growing these plants. There's a lot of rumors around these plants that they're difficult to grow, and that just is not the case. They require certain specific requirements for success. Now, what I want to do now is start, and I'm going to break up the carnivorous plants into two categories. Now, for you more seasoned growers, this might be a little bit hard to hear, but I'm going to break it down into bog carnivorous plants and non-bog carnivorous plants. Now, there is a whole lot of different varieties in between, but this is a very key point that I want to make. A lot of times, growers on these forums will either be given misinformation from local nurseries that just don't know better, or they'll think they have one and that they think the care is all the same. That is not true. So right here I have a Nepenthes, which is a tropical pitcher plant, which is an epiphyte or a lithophyte for the most part, or a quasi-epiphyte or lithophyte, if you will. And here I have a Drosera capensis, which happens to be a bog plant. Now, both are carnivorous, both require both require different care. A lot of the elements are still the same, which we'll talk about now, but there are different cares. If you grow these both the same, you will kill this one. All right, so for Drosera or sundews, they require a growth much like a Venus flytrap. They want peat moss and they want to be kept wet at all times. They don't mind having their roots wet at all. As a matter of fact, they enjoy that. So I tend to grow this with water about halfway up the pot, and they thrive. Now, they do like bright light, which is the same for Nepenthes to a point, but these plants like very bright light. So they'll do about 12 hours in direct sunlight, whereas a Nepenthes would like 60% shade, about 12 hours, and about 1 hour of that 12 in direct sunlight. Now, these plants are very, very, very easy to grow. I recommend Drosera for any new grower. Extremely easy to care for. The biggest things you need to know is either keep it in a south-facing window, you keep it outside in direct sunlight, or keep it in a terrarium with a grow light, or whatever it might be, a pot with a grow light. The biggest things for these are to make sure that you keep them damp at all times and to make sure that you keep their roots wet. I mean, it's just inevitable. Drosera capensis happens to be very forgiving as opposed to other Droseras, but I recommend this highly for new growers. Now, on that note, Venus flytraps require a lot of the same care as these. Now, what you need to ask yourself, Drosera capensis, almost any grower in the world can grow these just fine. Now, with a Venus flytrap and a Sarracenia, they too require bog conditions, and they like to be wet at all times. Now, there's a couple different changes here. Venus flytraps tend not to have a lot of water on top of them. They will do fine, they just won't be as happy with it. They grow on the border of South Carolina and North Carolina in a very bog environment, but there's a lot of tall grass around them, so they don't get that direct rainfall on them. They also have extremely long roots as compared to a sundew. Sundews don't mind having their roots wet, Venus flytraps don't like it. Now, they won't react like a Nepenthes will and die real quick, but they will sulk a lot. And so what I recommend is a very tall pot for a Dionea or a Venus flytrap, so that you can still keep the moisture or the soil moist inside water, but it keeps the roots from sitting in water. Venus flytraps and Sarracenia, though, one thing that you need to understand is they do require a dormancy. They can last a couple of years without it, but all of them need a dormancy. After about 2 years, they're going to start suffering, and they eventually will die. Now, they require a cold dormancy, and here's very key. If you have a Sarracenia or even types of Drosera, like a filiformis, they're going to die all the way back to what's called a hibernacula. And so that looks like the plant is completely dead, and you would be shocked at how many people throw away their plant because they think it's dead. It is simply in hibernation, hence hibernacula. Leave them be, they're fine. If you want to keep them, if you don't have the ability to grow these, because let's say you live in an environment that doesn't get very cold, or you happen to be in a place where you have to grow them indoors, you can, now this might tick off a lot of the people in your home, you can put them in the fridge in a dark place and let them cool that way. For the most part though, when you buy a Venus flytrap and when you buy a Sarracenia and even some Drosera, you need to understand whether or not they need a cold dormancy. There's pygmy sundews that also require a cold dormancy, and so you want to make sure you can provide that to them. A lot of new growers will buy these Venus flytraps getting into the hobby, and they don't understand that, and after a year or two the plant will die, and they just give up on carnivorous plants altogether, and we want to avoid that. And so understanding what your plant is and what your plant needs is important. Now, Drosera capensis or Madagascariensis, they don't need that, and so they will do just fine. The plus side also of a Drosera capensis or Madagascariensis is that they can be grown. They flower profusely, and the flowers self-pollinate, so you have to do nothing, and they'll completely grow or provide thousands of seeds that have about an 80% strike rate, so they will grow very fast. The other thing is you can take cuttings and place those cuttings in water and even straight on the soil, and they will provide new pups for you, and so you can get more plants. Very, very easy plant to grow, and it will be very rewarding to add that to your collection. Now, there are some other ones that we're going to talk about that are more bog plant related, like a Cephalotus follicularis that is grown in Australia, but it is very, very cantankerous, and I don't recommend that. That's more of a immediate to expert level plant. They like to have their soil damp, but they are very, very ornery. They do not like to be repotted, and they do not like having their crowns wet. The quickest way to kill a Cephalotus is to keep their crowns wet. If you do so, they will be thriving, and then dead out of nowhere. So you want to keep that in mind when you're growing them. Now, probably the easiest plant for new carnivorous growers to grow is called a Utricularia, and I'm going to show you that here. Now, this batch has seen better days. This one just sort of sits underneath my bench, but this looks, for all intents and purposes, like a pot full of grass, and it pretty much is. This is a carnivorous grass. And so Utricularia have their carnivory below the soil, and there's no way that I'll be able to get this on camera, but the longifolia and all other Utricularia have these itty bitty traps, and they're actually the most complex traps out of all carnivorous plants. And essentially what they do is they suck the prey in and they spit out the water. Now, there are different types of Utricularia. There are aquatic, there are semi-aquatic, and then there are bog Utricularia. The cool thing about them is they grow an abundance of beautiful, beautiful flowers. And so they are a great beginner plant, and they are also a great plant to have as sort of a bonus in your collection to provide a little pop. Now, something very, very important to note is Utricularia are very vigorous. They will grow and they will spread very fast. So if you don't want them like in your Nepenthes or any other types of plants, keep them separated, because as you can see, they like to spread and go nuts. Now, I have not even really provided, admittedly so, a lot of good care to these. This just sits in the bottom of my thing, and it has no problem growing just fine. The really cool thing about longifolia is it'll get an extremely big orchid-like flower that are just absolutely gorgeous. They're purple with a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow on that. So those are great for beginners as well. Now, Helium Forest, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to skip over that because I'm going to skip over the ultramafic types of carnivorous plants. Those are a little bit more difficult, require a little bit specific care. I want to talk now about Nepenthes. As you know, Nepenthes are my bread and butter, and it is what I grow and almost solely. I have a lot of Capensis, Venus flytraps, something like that, but I focus mainly on Nepenthes. These are completely opposite in their growing conditions to the bog plants that I just showed you. They do not like having their roots wet at all and will die if they stay wet. So those Droseras, Venus flytraps, you want to grow in water. These, you do not want them sitting in water. However, you do want the soil to be moist, and so I recommend top watering. Get a good humidifier. If you don't have a humidifier, you can grow them just fine in a home's humidity by simply putting like a tray of water and making sure it sits on a pot that's outside of the water so that the water evaporates around but does not sit the plant in water. These typically grow up in trees. They'll grow on the sides of trees, even on rocks, sandy soil. They do not like having their roots wet. So a good thing to have with these is to make sure that you have a 50% sphagnum moss and a 50% perlite mix, and you will do just fine. Now, I've already mentioned their light requirements. They like about 12 hours of light, 60% shade, with about 1 hour of direct sun. That sounds more complicated than it is. A simple grow light will do just fine, or you can place them in a windowsill and they will do just fine. If you do place them in your south windowsill, just make sure you be careful and to watch them because they are prone to burn if that sun is too bright. Now, Nepenthes are known as a tropical pitcher plant, and so they, depending on the variety you get, like a whole host of conditions. There are some called an Utricularia that almost are as bog as the Drosera. They don't want their roots totally wet, submerged at all times, but they will be able to withstand a lot more. However, understanding what Nepenthes you're buying is key to the success long-term of your plant and your desire to keep continuing to collect them. So a plant that like an Utricularia or an ultra lowland Nepenthes, they want almost 100% or 100 degree temperatures and almost 100% humidity. Now they can be grown intermediate, and I've even seen some plants that are grown closer to the highland conditions, although rare. It's all about acclimation and how you get them involved and sort of the hardiness of the plant as well. Now Nepenthes get a bad rap. For the most part, they are a beginner plant to an intermediate plant. There certainly are plants that require more advanced knowledge, like the ultra highland plants, which require their own specific setup, like an Edwardsiana or Velosa, that require a specific setup in order to be successful long term. So this brings me to my point of understanding what your plant needs and whether or not you can provide that care to it. So when you're getting these plants, like I said, I do a lot of forums, I help a lot of people out, and unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation out there about what care these plants need. And so people end up killing the plants very quickly, and they get very upset about it, and then they stop collecting them altogether. So do your homework, understand the basis of what the plant is and what the plant needs. It's very key, and don't rely on local nurseries. If they happen to specialize in carnivory, that is fine and they will know what they're talking about. But if it's a big box store or it happens just to be a nursery with regular non-carnivorous plants, you want to make sure that you understand what those plants need by doing your own research. And if anytime you have any questions, just reach out and ask. Now, a couple things you need to understand is not only can you grow the plant now, but can you grow the plant in a couple of years? And that's very key. So for instance, you want to understand how big does the plant get and do you have the room to provide for it? 2, what conditions do the plants need as they grow? Some plants will do just fine as babies, but as they mature, they need a different type of environment. So can you provide that? Now, one of the things you can do to sort of mitigate those risks is stick with hybrids. Species tend to be a little bit more exacting and a little bit more difficult to grow. If you grow hybrids, you are going to combine the best of two worlds. A lot of growers will use highland Nepenthes and lowland Nepenthes so that you can have a large range of conditions in which to grow them in. What I recommend is you also get onto a forum of some sort so that you can talk this out with people, but be careful that make sure that the information you're receiving is coming from people who are knowledgeable. And so what I recommend is getting more than one opinion, or seek out the advice of somebody who grows these for a living or for a hobby that's been in it for a while. And as always, I am always a resource at any given time. Please don't hesitate to ask me. Ask as many questions as you like. and I'm more than happy to provide an answer for you. If I don't have one, I'll seek out a lot of my contacts and make sure that we get you the answer that you need. All right, folks, so that was a lot of things to cover. The basis of this video is simple. Understanding what carnivorous plant you're buying and understanding how you can grow them. Now, this video could have been 15 times as long if I'm going into each, and I will spend more time delving into each individual type of carnivorous plants and their specific needs. The purpose of this video is to give you a rundown, a high-level 30,000 foot view of some sort of the things that you're going to experience when you first get into the hobby, and understanding what is the strategy for success. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. I'll see you soon.